Just some brief ideas about what's going on in Europe now that the Italian elections are over and the three right wing parties with Maloney and the other two um, conservative parties um, forming a coalition, Berlusconi and Salini, I think the other guy's name is. They're going to form a conservative party. Now, it turns out that Maloney has been friends for a long time with Viktor Orban, who, of course, is the favorite um, whipping boy of the left wingers and the socialists and lots of the intellectuals. um, for whatever faults he may have, he certainly has durability. Somebody who's been elected for 12 years for whatever reason, in whatever circumstances, is not to be dismissed. And now that the right wing parties, not just in Italy, but also in some of the other countries, are becoming stronger, and even the existing more left wing parties or left leaning parties in Eastern Europe are having a lot of trouble. The Prime Minister of Slovakia recently publicly accepted or declared that Slovakia is on the verge of bankruptcy because of the enormous inflation caused by the lack of fuel coming from Russia. And of course, that's partially because of the sanctions. And of course, now that this explosion or explosions occurred in the North Sea, there's even more problem. Russians have also stopped sending fuel through the Ukrainian pipeline, which was previously going through Poland, and therefore there basically is no Russian gas coming to Europe except through Turkey, and even that is very iffy how long that will last. So the general situation is pretty dire in Europe. The inflation is growing incredibly fast. The war in the Ukraine, rather than slowing down, seems to be accelerating. There is not a lot of promise and hope for the Europeans. And the saddest part of it all is the reason that there is no hope for the Europeans is because there's no leadership in the United States. The United States is at the moment being led by a bunch of behind the sceners, people that most people don't know anything about, and if they do have names like Victoria Nuland, who there are all kinds of stories about who she is, what her role is. Again, very hard to pin down. But all these people in the background, nobody in office, nobody with a name that is supposedly recognized, like the president, who, although his name is recognized, uh, who he is and what he is never very clear, or his vice president, who makes the most absurd statements that are contradictory, if not ridiculous, uh, every time she opens her mouth. These people, who at one time were nobodies, and neither one of them, by the way, has ever shown any kind of intellectual, political, or any other kind of acumen. Biden has been an idiot ever since he's been in office. People don't know that because people only saw what the press has presented. Biden was widely accepted and known in the Senate as one of the stupidest politicians there. And there are people, I personally witnessed his stupidity at a hearing which he chaired, in which he asked the dumbest questions I'd ever heard a politician ask. So these people, and I'm not even going to comment on Kamala Harris, who is a total um, political hack who rose in the party purely on her acquaintances, to put it kindly. Okay, so these people are nobodies. They're incapable of leading anything. They probably couldn't lead a grocery store and run it properly, much less the United States of America. And because of that, the Western world, which after the Second World War has, for better or for worse, even among some of the weaker presidents or the less gifted presidents, has been in the lead, has that Europeans have looked to the United States for leadership, for guidance. We have nothing. We offer nothing of that. So as a result, the Europeans are completely lost, and many of the Europeans, especially in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, suspect all kinds of powers, financial and otherwise, behind the politicians that are working against the interest of Europeans. That is a terrible situation. And to whatever degree the Europeans are right in their assumptions or their ideas about what American politicians or American money interests have in mind, and there are some pretty legitimate arguments for huge investment corporations which have control over trillions of dollars, what they're trying to do and how they're trying to manipulate the world. The point is that there used to be a time when those people were not completely able to do things independently of political leaders. And and now we have gotten to the point where the political leaders are simply puppets in their hands of these huge international monetary interests that are no longer, that have nothing to do with capitalism. By the way, it's their result. If anything, it's a sort of an inverted kind of fascism, because fascism was originally supposed to be the government in union with the corporations running the country. Now it's the corporations that use the government as sort of a puppet to do their bidding. That's kind of an interesting way of doing it. It's as if in the time of Mussolini, the Fiat Motor Company were running Italy, and Mussolini was doing its bidding. That's sort of where our modern day sort of pseudo fascist system has come. And by the way, I'm using this term ironically, because it's not fascist really. It's a new fangled form of power centralization. The fascists have really nothing to do with it. The fascists were a particular party in Italy that had its roots in Italian history and Italian social problems. Most importantly, in the terrible losses and sufferings of the First World War, which just Italy had lost enormous amounts of blood and money in, just as most of the other European countries had. So the two are it's more of an ironic, sarcastic reference to fascism. And I purposely am trying to be a little bit ironic that the leftists call people like Meloni and Orban and any of the conservatives fascists. Whereas in fact, the interesting thing is that in many cases, they're much more democratic and much more reliant on the voters and convincing the voters. And sometimes, of course, they can convince voters of things that may not be exactly the way that they should be, but that's the way politicians are. Anyway, they are rely much more on the voters than the leftists do, because leftists don't seem to care. Once they're in office, once they're in power, they don't care about what people think, and that's a lot closer to dictatorship, whatever you name it, whatever label you put on it. And of course, because they know that the dictators, the leftists and the progressives, they know that they want to control and lead things in the way that they want. They always label their opponents as fascists, because with the labels like fascists or Nazi, you can always terrorize people and scare them into voting against a particular group or particular party. Anyway, um, that's about enough. I didn't want to go on to a long discussion, but we have a lot of scary things to look forward to, and I will get back to some of these things in next um, video.